welcome back to another video. Today we are reacting to Film Theory Rick's Final Chance Rick and Morty Season 4 by the Film Theory. So subscribe to support me, hit that bell so that you get notified every single time I upload one of these videos, and like so that you can support me also, and check out the description because everything I do is in the description. So please check those things out. Alright, so yeah, in 3, 2, 1, be sure to do all of those things, people. Be sure to do all those things.
In the Rick and Morty Season 4 finale, Rick has this epic anime-inspired duel against Phoenix Person, the reborn BP.
It is now PP.
And Rick, for the second time this season, gets wrecked. Also, shout out to the funny detail of him drinking from his flask and immediately exiting his digestive tube, probably just there to help him process alcohol more effectively. Anyway, long story short, I'm not surprised Rick didn't die. We've seen him survive catastrophic injuries before, but I'm more surprised that Rick didn't pull out a secret weapon. No, not that secret weapon. Gross. Get your mind out of the gutter. No, Bird Person himself tells us that Rick's catchphrase of wubba lubba dub dub means I am in great pain, please help me. It's in Bird Person's own language, in fact. So if Rick suddenly said this in his final moments, does that mean Phoenix Person softens and gives up the fight against his friend? Nah, too sappy for this show. Now, if they'd realized their mothers had the same name, now that would have been awesome.
Save Martha! Why did you say that name?
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that'll go on forever. 100 seasons, films and theories, 100 episodes, theorizing about films and theories, and also TV and YouTube theory, and sometimes even book theory, comic theories, comic theories, that's the thing. Films and theory, 100 years.
So
That's the one certain part about all of this is 100 years. 100 years until the heat death of the universe, Rick and Morty. 100 years, films and theories, heat death of the universe. Maybe you have to be drinking whatever's inside Rick's flask to be able to pull off a rant like that. Anyway, it was worth a shot. Citadel of Theorists, it's no secret that I have long been a huge fan of Rick and Morty and all things Swifty. But season 4, well, I gotta say it really salvaged itself in the end for me. I gotta admit, I didn't love the first half of the season. Sure, I appreciated the mystery of the cat, the references to the anime, and getting introduced to the world of Snake Jazz, but overall it was missing a lot of the character relationships that made this show so special to me. But now that the season's over, I can honestly say that this was probably at least the most meaningful season yet to happen. And not because of clones or the return of Tammy or face-hugging aliens, but because the season was all about the characters' search for identity. It was very much like the second act of a 3-act play. We've established who our main characters are and the world that they live in Act 1, and now we see the problems introduced into these people's lives. We see the toxicity that exists inside these relationships. We learn that those who were once the butt end of our jokes might just be the best off. This was a season where characters evolved and changed and found new identities for themselves, and those who were unable to grow ultimately got left behind. But where this all gets really juicy is that Season 4 doesn't just represent an identity crisis for each and every one of our main characters, it's also the crisis of identity facing the show itself, facing the people who make the show. And understanding all of this is what gives us a clue as to what we might expect from Season 5. So sit right back in your laser-proof Wranglers and pour yourself a nice Wendy's Frosty Chino, because it's time to hitch a ride with Invisible Theory Truck Matt Pat. It's a new franchise. Season 4 sees every member of the Smith family looking for and or questioning their place in the world, or I suppose multiverse. For Morty, his unquestioned identity for the entire show has been as Rick's sidekick. It's easy to forget, but Season 3 ended with Rick and Morty beating up the president so they can spend a bit more time playing Minecraft together. Sure, there have been hints here and there that their relationship might be decaying.
He bails on everybody! He left you to rot in a world that he ruined, because he doesn't care! So if you really want your grandpa back, grab a shovel! The one that won't let you down is buried in your backyard!
But Season 4 really took it all the way. In Episode 1, the Death Crystal episode, we see Morty choose not to revive Rick, instead opting to keep him dead and prioritize himself, dying at an old age in his crush's arms. Episode 3, the Heist episode, shows him opting to skip multiple adventures with Rick in order to pursue his own dream of writing a Netflix heist pilot. The Dragon episode is all about Morty getting to go on self-directed fantasy adventures where he proves himself more capable in a world where Rick's technology is useless. Until, of course, the show gives up on that really cool angle and just gives Rick godlike powers yet again.
Boo! so not cool.
In the episode Pro Mortius, Morty rises to become the leader of the Glorzo aliens. In the Vat of Acid episode, he sees the limitations of Rick's plans and stands up to him about it.
A vat of fake acid? Are you dying of dementia?
When did you get so
Dying of
cocky?
dementia.
Tonight, Rick. The night I saw you fail.
And in both episodes 9 and 10, it's Morty and Summer saving Rick's life instead of the other way around. Up to this point, Rick's scientific wizardry has always seemed like a solution for Morty, because whenever they screw up, they can just teleport or change realities. But Rick and his bag of tricks are empty. Morty, over the seasons, but especially here in season 4, has learned that they're merely a means to avoid actually living a real life. They're irresponsible. It's a lesson that's reinforced in that Vat of Acid episode, when Morty learns, through his video game style reset button, that life constantly able to reset is pointless, and that it's the consequences of our actions that ultimately make life worth living.
Living without consequences is great, but then I started wondering, what am I living for? We are who we are because of consequences.
So when Morty rejects Rick's offer to find out which Beth is his real mom in the finale, it's him turning his back on Rick's trickery in favor of living a more normal, consequential, and thus a more meaningful life. The season started with this rant.
100 years,
Pushing
Rick
it
and
to the
Morty
limit,
not
Rick and
sticking
Morty
to one
pushing it to
path,
the limit.
trying different things,
But then
making
also
sure to
pushing
keep
it
out of a
anywhere
rut.
not near.
All about Rick and Morty adventuring together for another 100 years. But by the end of the season, Morty's decided to be his own person, outside of Rick's influence. Now that is a character arc.
Morty!
And Summer, we work together. That's our arc.
Summer is coming at her identity from the opposite direction. She's usually on the outside of Rick and Morty's adventures looking in, but just like Morty, she too is looking to establish a new and independent identity. Like any normal teenager, throughout season 4, we see her trying new things to help define who she is. She's inexplicably carrying a toothpick in her mouth.
It's a toothpick. I'm a toothpicker now. Get used to it.
Are you that desperate for a thing?
Trying out podcasts, running from match to match on the Love Finders app. What a stupid name for that thing. Or
Love
just getting into
Finders.
snake jazz.
It's my jam.
Seriously, my new thing now is snake jazz.
It's also clear from episode 1 that she still feels left out, and she wants to be a part of the Rick and Morty duo.
I was just joking around. You just seeing if you guys pay any attention to me.
But over the course of the season, we see Summer develop into her own woman. She rules over the Glorzo civilization. She becomes an all-powerful archer. She saves Rick's life multiple times. By the end of the season, she's found herself as strong and independent. She's happy to be Morty's sister, and she no longer needs Grandpa's approval. She recognizes that her family was living a fairly normal life before Rick came in and disrupted it, and she's over him driving them apart. As she puts it in her last line of the season,
Yeah, Grandpa Rick, don't drag us into your just because you're losing control.
Summer's desire to be part of Rick and Morty's adventures was never about finding ways to hack the universe. It was always about being included. Now she realizes that she can just team up with Morty. She can have that inclusion, all without Rick's destructive baggage weighing her down. Of all the interesting plots and subplots from season 4, one that flew under the radar almost the entire time was the revitalization of Beth and Jerry's marriage. Season 3 ended with Jerry back in the family and Rick on the defensive. And now, just one season later, even Jerry has found himself a new identity. He is no longer the worm that we saw him as in season 2. He's now finding strength against Rick and is starting to reassert himself as the man of the household, provided he was ever really the man of the household to begin with, let's be honest. Throughout his season 4 adventures, we see him save his own life.
I am the Jesus Christ of Christmas!
We see him lead a civilization. We see him save Beth's life. We see him save Rick's life in a delightfully Jerry way.
It's me, that Tammy girl. I'm more alive than I've ever been.
Saved the day with puppeting. Only one with a decent arc.
Most importantly of all, though, Jerry is coming to realize that
That's
he
buff
doesn't
Jerry.
need to be the hero to be useful. He might not have had any soulmates on the Love Finders app, but Beth chooses him anyway. He might be a dork who glorifies camping, but his s'more stick ends up saving Beth. Jerry is aware that he's a
What?
but he's made peace with the idea that Beth and his family are all he really needs to be happy. And when you look at that self-realization compared to the endless misery and cynicism of Rick, who can never truly be happy, Jerry is the one who really comes out on top.
Well, I was impressed, Dad. He saved my life, no thanks to you.
Which brings us to Beth, who's faced in season 4 with the most literal identity crisis, as she continues to grapple with the idea that she might be a clone. And though we don't see much of her this season, even Beth Beth has an identity arc. Clone or otherwise, she transforms from the insecure, dissatisfied woman trying to numb her pain in earlier seasons to a confident mother.
I'm gonna mother you until your 18th birthday, even if I get thrown in prison for non-consensual mothering.
And skeptical, but ultimately loving wife.
Look, on the off chance that you use the app.
I didn't use it. Did you?
Me? No.
Well, then we're all good, dog.
But it's building a civilization with her father that really sets the turning point in her character's search for identity. Early in episode 9, we see the old Beth peek through, as she delights over the praise that Rick gives her.
These kids may not be mine, but you definitely are, my little steampunk overlord.
And yet, midway through the episode, Rick abandons her, just like he did to her when she was a child, to prove himself as a god against another god, which ultimately backfires. And in turn, it almost gets Beth killed, leaving Jerry as the only one to save her. By the end of this episode, Beth's season arc is pretty much complete.
Well, I was impressed, Dad. He saved my life, no thanks to you.
And this all culminates with the season 4 finale where we come face to face with Beth's clone, or the original Beth. Honestly, the episode doesn't give us a whole lot of clarity. But the promotion for their video game Pocket Mortys after the episode may have by calling Space Beth Clone Beth in the game. Regardless, the Beths conclude that it doesn't matter.
Sure you'd love
Alright,
for us
so
to
there's
meet up.
actual proof that Space Beth is Clone Beth. Alright, so the actual original Beth, the actual Beth, is actual Beth. The Space Beth is the Clone Beth. Alright.
That from you, but I don't care what's in that vial.
They've both found their identity, one defined by not needing Rick's approval. They're strong in their own ways, and those ways don't include him. Leaving us with Rick himself, who is in pretty bad shape at the end of the season. I'll pat myself on the back a little bit here because I totally called the ending of the season, but not too much because I also made a video about how Rick didn't actually clone Beth at all, so whoopsie there. Anyway, Rick is left broken and alone at the end of the season for exactly the same theme that we've been talking about with every other character. Because instead of finding a new identity like everyone else, Rick refuses to change. He recognizes that he's a jerk to everyone and everything around him, but he just doesn't do anything about it. He thinks that lampshading it by directly calling it out is enough, but it's not. At least not anymore. This is him in season 3.
Bad father all the way to the max over here.
Now compare that with his realization at the end of season 4.
I'm a terrible father.
Rick historically was comfortable with the fact that he wasn't a good dad because he convinced himself that nothing matters. He's not entirely wrong about that.
Yeah.
When humans are just a small speck of dust in an infinite universe, yeah, our actions are pretty meaningless on the scientific level. But when you're not looking at the objective reality of the universe and instead zoom all the way down to the family level, into the subjective reality in which we all live, well then, we're all the center of our own little universe. And it's there that you're able to find true meaning, true purpose, and true happiness. And that is when your actions literally make a world of difference. But will Rick ever be able to grow up and see that? That is the fundamental question hanging over the rest of this show. Okay, so our characters are having a bunch of identity crises throughout season 4, but does that really tell us anything about where the show's headed? Yeah, a lot. Because the crisis of identity that the characters are having is clearly mirroring the discussion that the makers of the show are having about its identity throughout this season 2. This was the first season produced after the series was picked up for 70 more episodes, and the pressure of how to
70
handle
more
that many more
episodes.
installments of this series while still maintaining what made this show great in the first place is the core arc throughout this entire season 4. Don't get me wrong, Rick and Morty being meta and breaking the fourth wall is nothing new. It all goes back to the pilot episode, but it's never been as specific as it's been in season 4, where almost every episode that aired has some deconstruction of what it means to make the show of Rick and Morty. It's most obvious in the Story Lord episode that we covered in great detail already, but there's so much more to it, and it all has one common theme: the debate over making the show serialized or episodic. Serialized television tells a single story from beginning to end, usually in chronological order, like Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad. Pick up in the middle of those series and you don't have a clear idea of exactly what's going on. Episodic television is often seen as more formulaic, and events from one episode don't really affect all the other episodes around it. Think The Simpsons, or Seinfeld, or most seasons of South Park. Things happen, but there's always a reset button at the end of the episode. It's a debate that's set up from the very first episode of the season. We end it on this rant.
Sometimes we'll do classic stuff, other times we'll do whatever.
Sometimes we won't even do anything.
A direct callback to a very similar speech that happens at the end of the pilot episode of the show when nothing mattered and everything was just meant for fun. And that's not all. In this very episode, kicking off season 4, we have Fascist Morty outright declare that he wants to have fun, classic adventures like in the good old days.
I want to have fun, classic Rick and Morty adventures like in the old days.
You know what? It would really help if you could just say anything other than what you don't want.
I like Mr. Meeseeks.
Okay, now we're talking.
Here, Fascist Morty is serving as the voice of the fans who didn't like the more serialized route that the show was taking throughout season 3, where the season told an arc about Beth and Jerry's separation and the fallout with the rest of the family. And Rick, basically responding with, "Tell me something that you do like," is clearly a stand-in for the feelings of the show's creators. It's them begging fans to stop complaining about everything and instead offer them something productive, something they like, some constructive criticism about the creative decisions that are happening on the show. So the first episode of season 4 sets up this arc about the identity of what the show is. And we see this debate play out throughout most of the other episodes. In the Vat of Acid episode, we get this exchange.
What about my video game style place-saving device?
Yes, Morty, I saw it on Futurama.
Oh, so you don't do anything unless it's original.
In the first few seasons, Rick and Morty didn't have to worry about being unoriginal because it was presenting us with new characters, establishing its own style. But now the makers of the show have to continue to make decisions about whether characters and stories should reoccur, how original their concepts need to be, and on and on and on. And we're seeing those debates literally taking place on the screen through the voices of these characters. In that very same episode, we also get this line.
There's no such thing as a bad idea, Morty. It's about execution.
This discussion of there being no bad ideas is a frequent topic in groups of creative individuals. They even poke fun of what many consider to be the weakest episode of the series.
Morty, wanting a dragon isn't an idea.
I'm not talking about that. I'm constantly pitching you ideas, Rick, and you act like they're not even worth thinking about.
This whole sequence isn't just two characters arguing. It's a writer's room debating what can and can't be an episode of this show. It's a debate that we see embodied in other episodes too, by Jerry's mysterious cat in the middle of the season. A cat that literally stands for everything not needing an answer and just having fun. When Jerry asks why the cat can talk, we get yet another writer's room-esque quip.
Why are you talking?
Why should that matter?
Why should it not matter?
Of course, there's the Story Lord episode, which literalizes the fear that the writers team has of draining Rick and Morty of all their story potential. Even the final episode of the season has a reference to this ongoing tension.
She died the way she lived, over-serialized.
Tammy, like evil Morty and Bird Person, are too important to the quote-unquote plot of this show, and are thus, in Rick's terms, over-serialized. They can't be episodic characters, they have to only take part in episodes that are part of the serial narrative. Heck, every character in that last episode talks at some point about their arc, and how important their arc for the season was. So how does it all shake out? What conclusion does the show reach? What is the show's meta arc for season 4? Well, again, we turn to that Vat of Acid episode. In it, Morty embodies both halves of the serialized versus episodic debate. His reset button gives him the literal ability to be episodic, where consequences don't matter. He is literally hitting a reset button, but he himself is a continuous serialized entity, continuing across all those different timelines. And having lived both sides, he comes to this conclusion.
We are who we are because of consequences.
Any show can be random, smart, funny, but it's the running thread of these characters, their relationships, the dramatic stakes that run through their lives. Those are the things that make Rick and Morty such an exciting show to watch. It's the consequences of these characters' actions that matter. Will every episode from here be forwarding the plot in some way? No, certainly not. Rick and Morty can have their cake and eat it too. You can intersperse episodes about fascist shrimp or snake terminators while occasionally bringing back Bird Person or evil Morty or Mr. Meeseeks. So the identity that the makers of Rick and Morty have settled on is what Rick preached in the very first episode of the season: moderation on both sides.
I think you have to think ahead and live in the moment.
So what does any of this mean for the eventual season 5 that'll come like 3 years from now? Well, we'll probably still
it'll come like 2 years, like for June 2022, and then it'll be season 5, and then there's gonna be another part. There's 2 parts of season 5. There's gonna be one that's gonna be released in like December 2021, and there's gonna be one that's gonna be released in 6 months after. Yeah, that's how season 5 is gonna go. That's how season 5 is gonna go.
We'll be seeing continuations of our story developments. Morty and Summer will be teaming up for more adventures. Heck, it might feel more like Summer and Morty than Rick and Morty. And Rick will be on the outskirts, all alone. He'll be doing more solo adventures, maybe revisiting people and places from his past as he tries to prove himself to be a good friend. Heck, a good person somewhere in his past. And you know what? I don't think he's gonna find it. He'll find that almost everyone has a bad taste in their mouths from their interactions with him. He's been knocked down a few pegs throughout this season, but he still needs to be knocked down a few more in order to finally force that true change. The season's arc will probably have to result in Rick coming back to the family as a changed man, or the family being forced to forgive him in some way. And in order to do that, you really need Rick's egotism to be shattered. And then the family can finally reunite and be stronger together as a unit. Or, you know what? Who knows? Maybe Rick will never redeem himself. Maybe he'll just be a tragic figure doomed to his own misery. Or they'll spend the next 10 episodes doing nothing. After all, they have 60 more episodes left that they're on the hook for. Might as well burn through some time with more stupid Morty Dragon adventures before getting into that serialized heavy stuff. They gotta stretch this storyline out a long time. But hey, that
Dad doesn't want a dragon. Family gets dragon anyway. Dad is a dragon.
just a theory.
A film theory. Thanks for
And
watching.
cuts.
No. So yeah, thank you guys for watching this video. Subscribe to support me. Click that bell so that you get notified every single time I upload one of these videos. And click that, not click that bell. I already said click that bell, right? Please like this video to support me, and check out the descriptions down below. It's pretty easy to check out, so please check it out. So yeah, thanks for watching, and of course, peace. Peace.